The morning they wheeled me out of surgery, I noticed my wife wasn't in the room. The nurse said someone had called, said I'd be fine, said she'd come later. She didn't come later. She didn't come later. She came 3 days later, and she didn't come alone. My name is Walter. I'm 63 years old. I spent 31 years working as a structural engineer, raised 2 kids in a 4-bedroom house in Columbus, Ohio, and until 8 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life looked like. I was wrong about that. I was wrong about a lot of things. Let me start where it actually started. Not the surgery, not the papers, but the Tuesday afternoon in February when I came home early from a site inspection and found a folder on the kitchen table. My wife had left for her book club. The folder was just sitting there, half open, next to her coffee mug. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't suspicious. I just picked it up because it had my name on the tab. It was from an insurance company I didn't recognize. Inside was a life insurance policy. $250,000. Beneficiary, my wife. Policy start date, January 14th. I stood in my kitchen for a long time. We already had life insurance. Had the same policy for 20 years through my employer. She knew that. I knew that. We'd talked about it when we refinanced the house in 2019. This was a second policy, one I had never seen, never signed, never discussed. Except, and this is the part that made my hands go cold, there was a signature on the application. On the line that said, insured party. My signature. Or something close enough to it that I had to look twice. I took a photo of every page, put the folder back exactly the way I found it, poured myself a glass of water, stood at the sink looking out at the backyard we'd landscaped together 12 years ago. Then I called my doctor and made an appointment for that Thursday, because my chest had been bothering me for weeks, and I'd been putting it off. Seems like the right time to stop putting things off. The appointment led to a referral. The referral led to a stress test. The stress test led to a cardiologist in Westerville named Dr. Pham, who looked at my results on a Monday morning and said very calmly, "Mr. Kowalski, I'd like to schedule you for bypass surgery, quadruple bypass." The following week, I drove home and sat in the driveway for 20 minutes before going inside. I didn't tell her about the folder. I didn't tell her about the surgery right away either. I waited 2 days, told her on a Wednesday evening after dinner. Kept it matter of fact. Her reaction was, I don't know how to describe it. Not cold exactly, more like managed, like someone trying to look the right amount of worried. She asked about recovery time. She asked about who would handle the yard. She didn't ask which hospital. She didn't ask if I was scared. I was scared. I didn't say so. I called my son, Marcus, that night after she went to bed. He lives in Pittsburgh now, works in logistics. He's 34 and steady as a fence post. I told him everything, the surgery and the folder, both things. He went quiet for a while and then said, "Dad, don't touch anything. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. Not yet." He said he had a friend who was an attorney, a guy named Collins who handled estate and family law. He'd call him in the morning. I said, okay. I said goodnight. I lay in the dark next to my wife of 31 years, and I stared at the ceiling. You spend that long with someone. You stop really seeing them. You know their routines. You know their coffee order and which side of the bed they sleep on, and how they hum while they unload the dishwasher. But somewhere along the way, seeing becomes assuming. And assuming is how you miss things. I thought about the January before last. How she'd started going to the gym at odd hours. How she'd gotten a new phone and said her old one was glitching. How she'd mentioned once, just once, that she'd been talking to a financial advisor, someone she'd met through her friend Carl, and I'd nodded and not asked anything more about it. I thought about all the times I hadn't asked anything more. Marcus called me at 7:15 the next morning. He'd already talked to Collins. Collins wanted to see the photos I'd taken of the policy. I sent them over that same hour. Collins called me that afternoon. He didn't waste words. He said the signature on the application was almost certainly a forgery. Close, but not quite. Specifically, the way I looped the K in Kowalski. It's something I developed in my 20s when I was signing engineering documents 50 times a week. Nobody outside my office would know to replicate that. The person who'd forged my signature hadn't gotten it right. Collins said that was actually good news. He said, don't tell her anything. Don't change anything. Let him work. The surgery was that Friday. She drove me to the hospital. She held my hand in the intake area. I remember thinking, Even then, even knowing what I knew, that her hand felt exactly like it always had. Warm. Familiar. 31 years of familiar. They put me under at 7 a.m. I woke up in the cardiac ICU sometime around 2 in the afternoon, with a tube in my throat and a nurse named Patrice leaning over me saying, "Mr. Kowalski, you did great. Just breathe, breathe for me." I breathed. The first 2 days were fog. Pain and fog and the particular sound of cardiac monitors that I will never forget as long as I live. Marcus flew in from Pittsburgh. He was there when I could finally talk, sitting in the chair by the window with dark circles under his eyes. My daughter, Renee, came the second day from Cincinnati. She cried when she saw me, and then got embarrassed about crying and pretended she wasn't. My wife visited both days, brought flowers the second time, spoke to the nurses pleasantly, asked the right questions, stayed the right amount of time. I watched her the way you watch someone when you finally understand you don't know them anymore. On the fourth day, a Tuesday, she came in the afternoon. The kids had both gone back home. I'd insisted, told them I was fine, told them to go to work. It was just the two of us. She sat in the chair by the bed. We talked a little. Normal talk. The neighbor's dog. The gutters that needed cleaning before spring. Then she reached into her bag and put a manila envelope on the bed beside me. "I think you should read this," she said. I already knew what it was. Somehow, I don't know if it was everything Collins had said or just 31 years of reading her. I already knew. Divorce papers, filed in Franklin County. She'd listed irreconcilable differences. She said, "I didn't want to do this here, but my attorney said waiting doesn't make it easier." I picked up the envelope. I looked at it for a moment. There was a pen clipped to the outside, her idea of consideration, I suppose. I said, "Did you bring both copies?" She blinked. "What? There should be 2 copies. Did you bring both?" She said yes. She pulled the second copy out of her bag. I said, "Give me a minute." I read through the documents carefully. My hands were steadier than I expected. The papers were straightforward. Asset division, the house, the retirement accounts, my pension, the joint savings. Then I got to the section on life insurance. She had listed the employer-provided policy, the one we'd had for 20 years, as a marital asset subject to division. She had not listed the second policy. The one was my forged signature. The $250,000 policy she'd taken out in January. I read that section twice. Then I picked up the pen and I signed both copies. She looked surprised. Genuinely surprised. She'd expected a fight, maybe. Tears. An argument. She'd expected a man in a hospital bed who was scared and tired and not thinking clearly. I said, "You'll want to file those promptly." She took the copies back. She said something about hoping we could be civil. I said I hope so too. She left. 20 minutes later, the minute she was gone, I called Collins. He already knew she'd serve me. Marcus had warned him it might happen during the hospital stay. Collins said the most important thing was that I'd signed. That sounds backward, but he explained it. He said the moment those papers were filed, my wife would trigger a formal asset review through the court. That review would require full financial disclosure from both parties. All accounts, all policies, all assets, including the one with my forged signature. Collins had already been in contact with a forensic document examiner in Columbus, someone courts recognized as an expert witness. She had reviewed the photos I'd sent and prepared a preliminary report. The signature on the insurance application was, in her professional opinion, not mine. Filing divorce papers didn't end things for my wife. It started them. I stayed in the hospital 9 more days. Cardiac ICU, then a step-down unit, then a regular room. I did my breathing exercises. I walked the hallway twice a day like they told me. I ate the food, even the gray mashed potatoes. Patrice, my night nurse, used to come check on me around midnight, and we'd talk for a few minutes. About her kids, about Columbus traffic, about nothing important. Those conversations meant more than I expected. Marcus called every evening. Renee called every morning. I talked to Collins 3 times that week. When I was discharged, Marcus came to pick me up. My wife had offered, but I'd told her. Marcus was already coming. She didn't push back. I moved into Marcus's old room. She moved into the guest room. Then, within 2 weeks, into an apartment in Worthington. She said she needed space during the process. I said that was fine. It took 4 months for Collins to put everything together. The forensic report. Financial records obtained through discovery, emails. Her financial advisor turned out to be less discreet than she'd expected once subpoenas were involved. There were records of conversations going back 14 months. The insurance fraud case was referred to the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office. That's separate from the civil divorce proceedings. That's criminal. I'm not going to describe that in detail because it's still ongoing. What I can tell you is that the insurance company voided the policy and has cooperated fully with investigators. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks ago. The house is mine. We'd had it appraised as part of discovery, and it's worth considerably more than it was when we bought it. My pension is mine. Turns out there are protections for that under Ohio law that her attorney apparently hadn't fully accounted for. The joint savings were divided. That part was straightforward. I had lunch with Renee last Sunday at this diner in Cincinnati she likes. Booth by the window, good pie. She asked me how I was really doing. Not the version I give to people who don't need to know, but the real version. I told her the truth. Some days are fine. Some days I wake up and reach for the other side of the bed out of pure habit. And then I remember. And there's this moment, just a moment, where it hits me. Not that she's gone, but that she was already gone long before she left. That the person who sat in the chair by my hospital bed and looked appropriately worried was someone I'd been living next to for years without actually knowing. That's the part nobody tells you. The paperwork and the lawyers and the court dates. Those are hard, but they're solvable. What's harder is understanding that the loneliness you feel after isn't new. You were already lonely. You just hadn't named it yet. Renee held my hand across the table. She has her mother's hands, which is something I'm still working on separating from the rest of it. She said, "You going to be okay, Dad?" I believe her. That's new too, believing it. I'm not entirely sure what the rest of this looks like. I have the house. I have Marcus and Renee. I have Dr. Tour, FAM's follow-up appointments every 3 months and a daily medication routine and a cardiac rehab class on Tuesday and Thursday mornings with a group of people who are mostly my age and mostly tired and mostly trying, which turns out to be enough common ground for a surprising amount of conversation. I have Collins, who I now owe a considerable fee and also a considerable amount of gratitude. And I have, this is the thing I keep coming back to, I have the knowledge that on the worst day, lying in a hospital bed 4 days after open heart surgery, I made the right call. Not the emotional call. Not the scared call. The right one. I knew what was in those papers before I picked up that pen. I knew about the forged signature and the policy and the 14 months of conversations with her financial advisor. I knew that signing was the correct move legally, that it was the move Collins had actually told me to make if she served me before the criminal referral went through. I knew all of it, but knowing something and holding on to it when you're in pain, when you're exhausted, when someone you've loved for 31 years is standing next to your hospital bed, that's different. That's where people lose their footing. That's where fear makes decisions. I didn't let fear make this one. She thought she was walking out of that hospital with the beginning of everything she'd planned. Clean exit. Grieving widow. Eventually, the policy would have guaranteed that. Or a compliant, broken ex-husband. Either way, she was supposed to win. She didn't know I'd found that folder in February. She didn't know I'd already called Marcus. She didn't know Collins had a forensic examiner's report sitting in a file in his office on Broad Street. She handed me a pen in a hospital room and thought it was over. It was just starting. I have a lot of mornings now that are quiet in a way they weren't before. The house feels different with just me in it, bigger in some ways, smaller in others. I drink my coffee on the back porch when the weather allows. I've started paying attention to the yard again, which I'd let go during recovery. The azaleas my wife planted along the fence are coming back, which I'm choosing to find neutral rather than complicated. Patrice, my night nurse from the cardiac unit, sent me a card after I was discharged. She said she was glad I was doing well and that I'd been one of her good patients. I put it on the refrigerator. Small things. That's what holds you together when the big things fall apart. Small, specific, true things. Marcus is coming down next month. We're going to a Clippers game. Columbus's AAA team, not the NBA. We used to do that when he was a kid. Hot dogs and bad baseball and everything, right, with the world. I'm 63 years old, and I just survived bypass surgery in a 31-year marriage, ending in a hospital room, and a criminal insurance fraud case that I'm not allowed to say more about. I'm still here. I think that's the whole point. I've had a lot of time to sit with what happened. Recovery gives you that long, quiet hours where your mind goes to places you'd normally outrun with work and routine and the comfortable noise of daily life. And what I keep coming back to isn't the betrayal itself. It's the sequence of it, the way everything connected backward, like pulling a thread and watching the whole thing unravel in reverse. She made her choices. That's the part I had to accept first. Nobody forced her hand. She found an opportunity, or thought she did, and she built something around it quietly, over months, while I was right there in the same house. That takes a particular kind of decision, made not once, but dozens of times. Every day she woke up and continued. Every evening we ate dinner together and she continued. That's not a moment of weakness. That's a sustained choice. And sustained choices have weight. They accumulate. They land somewhere eventually. Mine did too. The choice to photograph that folder instead of confronting her. The choice to call Marcus that night instead of lying there alone with it. The choice to stay calm in that hospital room when every tired, hurting part of me wanted to say something I couldn't take back. Those choices accumulated too, just in a different direction. I think about Walter, about myself, at 63, 4 days out of bypass surgery, holding a pen in a hospital room, and I understand now that the steadiness I felt in that moment wasn't something I found on the spot. It was built. Slowly. Over years of learning when to speak and when to wait. Over a career that taught me structural integrity. That what holds things together isn't visible on the surface, it's in the foundation. I didn't know I'd been building that. But I had. Trituxa. Real intelligence, the practical kind, isn't about knowing the most. It's about knowing what to do with what you know and when. Collins told me what move to make. I had to be the one who actually made it in that room under those circumstances. Information doesn't protect you. What you do with it does. No. That steadiness, that refusal to collapse isn't dramatic. It doesn't look like strength from the outside. It looks like a man signing divorce papers calmly and saying, okay. It looks like eating gray hospital mashed potatoes and doing your breathing exercises and trusting that the right people have the right information. It's not glamorous. It's just continuing correctly when continuing is hard and talk. Oh, hiss. Doing the right thing meant not becoming what I discovered. It meant letting the legal process work. It meant being honest with Marcus and Renee about what was happening instead of trying to protect them from it. It meant sitting across from Renee at that diner and telling her the real version, even the parts that hurt. The consequences came because they were always going to come. Not because the universe punishes dishonesty in some mystical sense, but because actions leave records. Signatures leave traces. Emails exist. Financial decisions have paper trails. She built something on a foundation she thought was invisible, and it wasn't. That's not fate. That's just how things work. I'm still here. The azaleas came back. Marcus is coming next month. Some foundations hold. You just have to build them right.